welcoming everybody to this evening's webinar on preparing for and recovering from disasters. And in Florida, most often that means hurricanes. As we know, very recently, almost the entire state of Florida was hit in some way by either Debbie or Helene or Milton. So when we set up this topic several months ago, we didn't realize how relevant it would be at this time. I'm not sure if there's anybody who's not in BPW, but for those who might not know about BPW, our mission is achieving equity for working women through advocacy, education, and connections. And one of the ways we do that is through our online webinars on a variety of topics. And so that's what tonight is intended to do. Our topic is preparing for and recovering from disasters, and we will really break the discussion into the two halves. One is before and the other is after. But to start us off, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to say a little bit about themselves and their personal and or professional experience with respect to disasters. And I'd ask them to keep that to about 3 to 4 minutes each. And I'm going to go based on how you appear on my screen. And so I'm going to start with Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Sarah Brower-Bardis, and I am an Irma survivor. And when Irma hit, I had just opened, I'm a psychotherapist. I had just opened my practice that year. And boy, you'd think with all the trauma that you'd be really, really busy, but you're not, because everybody's looking for food and shelter. So at some point after Irma, I think I had, $12 in my bank account, and the few people that were seeing me were fishermen that were paying me with stone crab and lobster. I ate well, but it was not keeping the practice going. And here I am, 5, 6 years later, and I am having a thriving practice. And so there is a way through. It just isn't fast.
Thank you, Sarah. Michelle?
Hey, everybody. Good evening. My name is Michelle Cavallo. In addition to being the president of this awesome organization, my day job is with Duke Energy, as you can see behind me. I've been with the company 35 years, so I have an interesting response to this because we at Duke Energy and predecessor companies, Progress Energy and Florida Power, take storms very, very seriously. So I've been with the company 35 years. And every time there's a storm in Florida, I go to work. So everyone starts hunkering down, and I literally am checking into my storm roll, which I do 24 hours a day. It feels like, other than when I'm sleeping, until the last customer gets their power restored. So I take storms seriously. I take them personally. I do have some stories, and I'll intermix them throughout the evening. So I can share, from a standpoint of an electric utility company that is trying to restore and all the things that I've seen and experienced. I too am an Irma survivor. I had a 60-foot tree come down in Irma. I had a 90-year-old mother-in-law with us and a carbon monoxide detector that went off, and we didn't know if it was really carbon monoxide or a battery, and we called 911. And guess what can't happen during a storm is rescue. Yep. So we sat outside and watched Irma with my 90-year-old mother-in-law and all the trees swaying. I'm also a survivor of Milton, which for the first time I'm 60 years old. For the first time in 60 years, I've lived in Tampa Bay my entire life. I had flooding. So I'm navigating that. So I'm a survivor of Milton as well. And I grew up on Indian Rocks Beach and seeing what Helene did to my beloved home and the devastation on the beaches. So I look forward to chatting about all of that with you all tonight. There are a lot of lessons learned.
Thanks, Michelle. Ronelle?
Hey, I'm Ronelle Montgomery. I am the Vice President of Economic Inclusion and Business Growth with the St. Petersburg Chamber, and I also co-manage an organization or collaboration with the City of St. Pete and the Chamber called the Greenhouse. And so we provide business resources, information, workshops to businesses locally and throughout the state. So for us, it was that, excuse me, recovery mode, helping businesses get information out from the moment that things settle down. It's interesting being in this position, not thinking about kind of that first responder type of mode where you have to let businesses know there was a water shutdown. So a team went out to do that. We had people go out to check out what was happening throughout the city so we can inform businesses. So that was a little bit different for me, especially I had to evacuate both times. I live in an area that is a mandatory evacuation. So me, my daughter, and our animals had to find places to go. And then like I said, as soon as things started clearing up, we got the call as we've got to do this. And then, home wise, thankfully, even though we live in a place that does have storm surge, we didn't experience it in our neighborhood. However, we did have a tree break off from the neighbor's yard into our backyard with Debbie. And people call Debbie, when Debbie was in our area, she was a tropical storm, but she did a lot of damage before she actually became a hurricane. So I'm just here just to share that information and how we helped other businesses recover and how we're hoping businesses can prepare for next season.
Stephanie?
I am Stephanie Markuski. My current life stage, I'm an ADHD life coach for parents who have ADHD, of kids who have ADHD. We tend to get very emotional. We have difficulty regulating our emotions, things like that. But also my background is actually construction management. And my very first hurricane was Andrew in Miami. We thankfully did not have any damage, but we were without power for a really long time. And we lived in the area that the National Guard came in and checked to make sure that you actually lived there, so there wasn't as much looting. But and then that was my senior year of high school, and then immediately, in college, I glommed onto the idea of going into construction management, and one of the best classes I ever had was a natural disasters class, and there were engineers and architects and construction management students all in there, and you could definitely tell who was from Southeast Florida, because we took over the class on the days that we talked about hurricanes, and we probably talked too much about it. But so I've seen both sides of it, and I don't keep up with everything in the construction industry, but I definitely am watching, how the codes have changed over time, and what's kind of important to know about a home, when you go to buy one or you go to build one too. So I look forward to that too.
Thank you all. I think what's obvious is that all of our panelists have personal experience with disasters, but they also have, from their own perspective, professional experience, either their own profession or helping other people with their businesses. Every year, I know locally in the Tampa Bay area, the newspaper publishes the Guide to Hurricane Preparedness. And I'm sure that happens across the state. My question, and I'm going to leave this up to whoever wants to take it, and then others can jump in, is beyond the obvious advice that's in that printed material that's given out to us, what do you think is the most important action to take beforehand, both personally and professionally, in terms of looking forward and preparing for a disaster?
I can say for myself, one of the lessons that I've learned, and and it's been a helpful lesson in terms of not only natural disasters, but, I have RA. And so now I have to think about, if I'm out of work for a medical reason, since then I have become way more aggressive in my savings towards my oh dear, it's not as polite, the word that I use, but oh dear fun. And, you know, and really making that a priority, because having funds available when a disaster hits is going to reduce your stress level significantly. And, you know, I never reached my goal of having a whole year set aside. But, you know, because I have RA, so I have a surgery and then I have to pull out of that. But I'm always trying to put it back in. And even when it's partially funded, that has been very helpful for stress level, and it's very helpful when things happen.
God, that is a great lesson learned, Sarah. I was going to say, because I did evacuate for the first time in my life during Milton, know your evacuation zone and take it seriously. Know where your shelters are. If you have a pet, find a pet-friendly shelter. If you have a pet-friendly shelter, get there early, because those tend to fill up first. The studies have shown people will not evacuate if they can't take their animals with them. Those would be top of mind for me, but I love that, making sure you have that emergency fund. Honestly, it's not something I've thought of, but it's super important.
You know,
Definitely.
I would add to, I'm so
Mhm.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I would
Go
add
ahead.
to that, Michelle, is I also make sure that during hurricane season, I have more cash on hand, because you may be coming back to a time that there's no electric, and it's good to have that.
Definitely.
ATMs don't work without electricity. That is true.
Yeah. Yep. And I was going to play off of that. You know, the big three things are anticipating what might happen. And that's the reason that the TV stations and the preparedness, the emergency preparation groups talk about it, you know, June 1st. And that's why we have tax exemption and everything. Start planning early to reduce your stress, and try and keep things that you can reuse each time. Like we have, hopefully people are not redoing their window coverings, their window protection every single time, but it always feels like they are, because I'm constantly hearing the board cutting around town. I don't know, but just trying to prepare ahead of time, anticipating the potential problems that could happen, identifying what you can handle, and what you might want to get a professional to handle, especially if you are not handy. And then managing what stressors might come up ahead of time. And then also after the hurricane itself too. So those are the big three things.
I would say, and I think a combination of what everyone has said, it's definitely what Sarah was talking about, you know, the fund, having money set aside. And I've heard people say that that is kind of their plan. People who've lived here in Florida all their lives, this season really, I think, shook up a lot of people, where they're going to have a plan where they can either, you know, have the funds to be able to evacuate and have a more thought out plan. You know, I know we've had the guides, but it's kind of like, okay, batteries, you know, those kind of things, you know, but you didn't really think about, okay, I'm without power for 7 days. And it was interesting because this time I actually did pull out cash before Milton. And when I was looking for food right after, it was like, you know, that Thursday or Friday, and I went to some place, and when I was in line, I saw that they had cash only. And I was like very thankful that I had pulled out, you know, some cash. But I think the research kind of goes before even that time. I think this time people started thinking about elevation. Where are you located? So I think even when people are considering opening up a business, thinking about, okay, exactly what is evacuation zone is it? What kind of equipment do you need? What does the design of your business look like? And how can you plan accordingly. So if that you think that's going to be important, find out areas where there is higher elevation. That was what I was researching afterwards to think, oh, I might be moving. So what is the highest elevation point in this county? So I can start researching. So I think if people are thinking about, opening up a business, taking those kind of things, or even when they're thinking about living somewhere, I think people are going to take a greater look at what that looks like in the future.
I have personal experience with that, having just sold my home to a woman who lost hers on the beach. And my house is 11 feet above sea level. And even though it's in an evacuation zone, water has never come close. But she was clearly looking for somewhere where she didn't have to worry about losing her home in the future. What do you think is typically overlooked in terms of planning?
I'll tell you one of the things that really helped us when we had to evacuate my mother-in-law was my husband had helped her prepare like a list of all her medications and her doctors and all of her phone numbers. And it was really handy to have that to kind of grab and just bring with us. The other thing is if you leave your house, if you are going to evacuate, thinking about, is there anything that's easy to pack that can't be replaced? I know we did that and kind of loaded our car with things that we just didn't think that we could replace. And the other thing I'd say, Stephanie, and you brought this up, which is knowing codes, is whenever you do get new air conditioning or maybe you need a new roof, really go the extra step with tie downs. I see people elevating their air conditioning units. So kind of critical infrastructure, think about protecting it. I think stuff like that is overlooked. And those are things that you can do now to really make it easier down the road.
And we are surrounded on the south and the north side by water, and we were super worried about storm surge and didn't have that problem, thankfully, either versus Helene or Milton. But we had well, actually it only ended up being 2 things that had motors that went bad, including the air conditioner. So like we had power, and so we came back from Miami to after Milton, and yet we still didn't have AC for another week. So I'm also thinking about things like power surge protectors for the house now, because yeah, I think that took out my air conditioner. I mean, these are, and a lot of this too is it's costly, and the things that you can do ahead of time. Like it was more costly to get that air conditioner right after Milton than it would have been if we had gotten it in March. But I'm also thankful we didn't wait until after the tariffs are put in place, because then it's going to be even, 25% more expensive. All these kind of things, the things that you can think about ahead of time to reduce your costs are gonna be important too. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I understand now post Irma is that there's really these stages that when I evacuated for Irma, I was thinking about evacuating for Irma, and I wasn't thinking about that the Keys were going to be shut down for 2 weeks. And so all I thought about was getting out of the way of the storm. I didn't think about what were going to be my needs. I couldn't really fathom the level of devastation that I was coming back to. And I didn't really plan for that. And I didn't realize that I would be gone as long as I was, and so now I think when there are storms in the neighborhood and I'm starting to make choices, I'm really thinking about the different stages that I need to be prepared for. The evacuation is in and of itself a stage. The return is in and of itself a stage. And then the long haul is then another stage.
But I think you raise a good point, Sarah, which is that one needs to think about, if I'm going to take my medications with me, maybe I need to take 4 weeks worth not just a couple of days worth. And so it's even thinking about the long term for an evacuation before you even have a chance to get home. So I think that's a very good point. If we move to after a disaster happens, what do you think is the most important thing that somebody can take, most important action that a person can take or a business can take immediately after the disaster passes?
Trying to manage stress. I started to see a meme come up on Facebook after this one, be kind to people in Florida. You never know how bad we've had it this past week. And we had to get gas when there was no gas or in town, and there were definitely choice words being said. It was very stressful. And I don't think anybody realizes just how bad it was going to be. And so nobody attempted, I don't feel like enough people attempt to work on their stress and get out of their heads and try and take the other person's point of view either. So I think we really all as a country need to learn how to work on our stress. But finding ways to let go of some of the things that are running through your head so you can actually get things done before and after.
I would say for us in sharing information, and I know it can be challenging, but I just suggest people stay tuned into their local area, their city communications, be it a newsletter, the television, Instagram, social media, because there are a lot of communications. I know we had a lot of communications coming from the chamber and from the city. And we were fortunate to have a resource-rich city. And even after Helene, there were laundromats that were available for people to get, their clothes washed at no cost. There was food trucks. So there's a lot of resources that are available. And and even though nobody at this time had experienced anything like that, things were put in place really, really fast. So I would just say it, and I know it's challenging with the power. That's what I said. If you're trying to hold on to what little bit of power you have to communicate. So having maybe a dedicated source to be able to see what's available in the time to help you get back on your feet a little bit faster. And so, like you said, with the stress and the grace, being able to get a hot meal somewhere or in a place that's cool. There were a lot of locations that were open for people to get power. But that's why I said, so have a plan on making sure you have maybe 3 or 4 communication resources in your community so that you know what's going on, what's available to you that can help you get back to a place where you can be in a state of grace a little bit quicker. So,
Ronell, my experience here was, again, we're a little rock in the middle of the ocean. And I'm just going to say I did eventually marry him, but one of the city council members, I turned to him saying, what do we do? And his house had been leveled quite a bit also. And he's like, I don't know. So we did eventually get married and we have a nice house now, but the city they weren't entirely, this is not a criticism. It's just the level of devastation. They weren't, how do you know what to do? And so there was a lot of misinformation and there were a lot of rumors and, so I almost have the opposite, which is just don't buy into it. I remember it was so maddening because you'd hear people saying you had to get an adjuster. If you didn't get an adjuster, it wasn't going to work. And then there were people who were saying, don't get the adjusters because they're all criminals and they're going to take your money and you won't get any money and you need to have an attorney and you should put it. There was so much misinformation that ratcheted up the stress level. So I guess what I would say is the first thing is breathe, just breathe. Yes, you have lost stuff. and it's scary and you don't know how it's going to look when it's going to be okay. But really try and find that place of faith that I am going to figure this out. It's not going to be overnight. I'm going to triage. Let me do my Maslow hierarchy of needs. Let me find some food. Let me get a place that I can lie down and get some rest, and then really have that faith that it does eventually all untangle. It just takes a while and you gotta wait for it.
So I have two things to add, and I love everything you guys said. Sarah, I have bad news for you because my house flooded, and it is still a very difficult maze to navigate between what your insurance company is telling you and FEMA is telling you and cities and counties. And
And you will never forget that
I wish I
smell.
had a really good story to tell here, but I don't yet. I'm trying to also give that a little bit of grace and say, the devastation is unprecedented. A lot of people in the building permit department are super stressed. Like, I'm also trying to give that grace, but so giving grace is good. The thing that came to my mind when you said number one thing is safety. After storms, electricity, poles down, wires down, you can't believe the number of people who get hurt. So I would say safety would be number one. If you are going to evacuate your home or business, shut your power off at the breaker box, shut your main water off, treat all down power lines as live. The very first thing we do, literally the minute the winds get below 30, is we join up with the city and county crews and we do what's called road clearing, because we need ambulances, fire trucks, and police to be able to get safely out on the roads. But hunker down. If you've evacuated, don't come back too soon. To me, safety would be my number one tip right after a hurricane.
Where do you all think that people generally run into trouble after when trying to recover from a disaster? And this can either be either in the short term or the long term. Does the bureaucracy not work as it's supposed to? Are there not enough people to process all the permits? What's your experience?
I would say I would follow up with Sarah and the rumors. I think that's the challenging piece is it's like telephone, somebody told this person and then it gets changed. And, there are, even though, bureaus and bureaucracy, but there are there are avenues to get information straight from the source, and your neighbor's experience is not going to be your experience because that's not the same story. So that's one of the things I would have people do is when they get to the point where they can lean into getting that information is going more to the source instead of leaning on more of the hearsay or things that are going in the news, because it does kind of level up the stress because you're like, this person told me this, but this person told me this, and I don't know what to do. So that would be my recommendation.
And when I hear that, and I hear that there are people literally saying that FEMA is choosing, one person over another, I get back to the stress part. We are feeding into the stress, and we aren't always able to separate ourselves from that stress, and it tends to cause people to impulse buy or overpay for things. We lose a lot of time, money, patience, those kind of things. So again, ways that you can reduce your stress even as you're going through these really, really stressful things. It helps you get your mind back. Is the best way I can say it, get your mind under control and make decisions from a better place. It's going to be stressful, but stay away from the Nextdoor app. Stay away.
Right?
Oh my God, it's the worst. Sorry. Stay away from some parts of X or Facebook or whatever, and try and go to the trusted news sources. But after a while, shut the TV off, because watching that is so frustrating. It makes it so much worse.
You know, one of the worst things that I found after the storm was the bureaucracy. You know, my husband decided that SBA stood for sorry I bothered applying, and I'm not going to tell you what we think FEMA stands for. And one of, because it's foul, but accurate. One of the what I experienced is, you know, I would go to FEMA and I would talk to somebody who said, oh yes, you know, we're going to help you. And then you had to call again and you couldn't get anybody on the phone. And then that person hadn't taken notes and you were starting all over. And it turns out that FEMA is all these different silos. And so they're telling you that there's all this help. And then after several weeks of waiting for this help to arrive, you get a letter that or note an email that says, we've decided that your case doesn't apply and we're going to send you to SBA. And you called them sobbing. I did. And they said, no, this is good because SBA is going to help you. And so then you go to SBA, who says, we're not going to help you because you should really be getting this from FEMA. And that feeling of just being kicked around and nobody is really going to be able to help you is it is the definition of the despair for me. And, you know, one of the things that I really, and then add into that the insurance wars, because flood is trying to tell you that it was a wind event. Wind is sending an engineer who says there was no aberrant wind event in the neighborhood on that date. I have no idea how you write that, but they wrote that. And so now, you know, this sense of being just kicked around and nobody will help was just devastating. And what I would say to that is, again, the same thing. Look, breathe, get yourself functional, get what you need for shelter, get your business as workable as possible. Try and get even partially started. I know that you don't have all the things you need and you don't know what the future looks like. Eventually you will figure out your path through some resource. There will be some resource, but for as many natural disasters, you know, we look at Katrina. I'm still doing trauma therapy for the Coast Guard that went through Katrina, and the trauma is because it was such pandemonium and nobody was in charge. I'm still doing intense trauma therapy about that experience. And because each disaster has its own unique characteristic, give those entities some time to get themselves sorted out and trust that you are going to find some help. And also keep in mind the rest of the country, at least for a week, knows that you've been through it, so you can start to get some grace on your mortgage, on your bills, because they know you can't pay.
Sarah, in getting ready for this conversation, you had shared an experience you had with SBA in terms of trying to reestablish your business, and what they were looking for was, my recollection was something illogical. Could you share that experience? Because I think we may have a lot of individual business owners here, and I think what you went through is a lesson that they would benefit from.
And maybe define I know what SBA is, but maybe not everyone knows that acronym, the Small Business.
Okay, so Small Business Association is one of the resources that is supposed to be administration. I mean, Small Business Administration is one of the resources that's supposed to be coming in to help after a disaster. One of the experiences I had was that when I went to SBA and I applied for a loan so that I could stay afloat, they said, we don't think that you're making enough money right now, so we're not going to give you a loan. And I tried to explain, but that's kind of the emergency loan idea, is that I'm not making any money and you keep me afloat until I can get back to making money, which did not resonate with them. Now, I've had conversations actually with our Chamber of Commerce, and they were having some of the same frustration. People had frustrations there as well. So one of the things to be thinking about is when you are going for a loan, think about what assets can you put as a form of collateral. That I think I did not do. I wouldn't have thought I needed to. And it was sort of hard to think of my poor gutted house that had flooded as a collateral item. Yes, that was one of the moments that I just did not know how I was going to go on, because of that maddening experience. And there isn't a great solution to that. Eventually I managed to piece together little bits of support, that I might be able to get $1,000 here. I even had a local charity that, my vehicle was gone also. And they said, well, we're not going to help you get a new car because we think that your overall loss is so great that you're not going to be able to survive here. So we don't want to waste the money on you, which was not good feeling. Sam, that was Coldwell Bankers. That was Coldwell Schmidt. I'm naming names. The system is at the point that a disaster has come through, the system is hit, and it's hit so hard that it feels like nobody has any resources. They will eventually regroup, but boy, at first, you're not going to find them right away.
We do have a success story locally that somebody actually, and I found out from them on Monday, a local business owner. She has a marketing business, and she applied for the economic injury disaster loan and did the information paperwork, and it's been approved. So now they're going to get back to her with the amount. So hopefully over the time frame, things have been put in place to make things a little bit better. But I also think for her, she had experience because of COVID. They're at that time too, they were doing those types of loans with the SBA and stuff like that. So sometimes those who have experience kind of now, maybe how to report on something better or different than you would have before in the past, just based on your experience. So just take that into consideration. Hopefully you won't have to have an experience where you'd have to rely on it. But thankfully we are hearing some of some positive stories intermixed with some of those people who are still a little bit frustrated.
And one of the things that is I've noticed listening to the local media, as businesses are reopening, they're publicizing that business is reopening. And I think that draws people in to support them. I know a lot of us have been felt that we need to support local businesses, but particularly those that were shut down for a while and then are reopening. So that's a way that the community can pitch in and help individual small businesses. And I think having the community having been through so much trauma with the hurricanes is very mindful of how much trauma there is. So.
Okay, so talking about that, when do we start forcing the politicians to talk about insurance? The problems that we're having with insurance, the problems that we're having with overdevelopment. Sarasota County, we had an area where it was flooded during Debbie only because that area didn't have a place for the water to go. Where, it's frustrating right now and stressful that I don't feel like we're being listened to about some of the bigger issues that come up when you have natural disasters, and the natural disasters are going to get worse if we don't tackle climate change. And I know that these are things that, individuals can't do anything about, but I'm just gonna put it out there that we need to come together.
I might suggest, and I'll ask Ronell to comment on this, that's a place where the local chambers can push legislative action which is much harder for an individual to do. Would you agree with that, Ronell?
I definitely would. And that is advocacy is, definitely a pillar of, for in the community in terms of that connection to local government, be it federal, local, or, county, and being able to have businesses come together collectively to kind of put together some of their concerns or questions, so that it's one voice. And it sometimes it's instead of having a lot of, people coming and doing that, but understanding that you're not alone in this, and being able to go to the politicians, and being able to then, you may not be able to travel to Tallahassee or wherever your state government is, but the Chamber of Commerce does have that opportunity to go there on behalf of the members who actually are a part of that organization. So definitely, tap into the resources of your local Chamber of Commerce's.
This is something I don't know, Ronell. Do the chambers work collectively, so that it's not just the individual chambers? It is 90% of the chambers across the state are advocating for X. Does that happen?
Um, There may be in some instances, locally with the raise and all that's happening. We actually worked with the Tampa, the beaches, Clearwater beaches, and Amplify those other chambers to do a statement and kind of do a campaign, so that once again, it's a collective voice speaking on a topic. And sometimes, then you have the people who are behind those organizations. So you have a lot more people. So we do work together regionally on some of the things that benefit the local, the local population or residents.
I know in preparing for this, one of the points that was raised is for the panelists to discuss surviving the short term versus the long haul. And I'm going to ask Sarah if she would start off addressing that issue. How does one differ from the other?
In the short term, you're sort of hot on the press. Everybody in the nation knows about what's going on, and people are really trying to help, and there are some resources that are pouring in, and then we're Florida, so they're trying to get us open as quickly as possible so we can get our tourist economy going as quickly as possible, and that's stressing the system, and we don't feel ready for it because our house is still flooded, or and so in the immediate, it's a disaster. Don't try to get online right away. Take those immediate resources that are coming in and think of this as a percentage game. Take whatever little bit, or here's a hot dinner, and here's a gift card, and you're pulling those things together just to stay afloat. In the long haul, even in your community now, you're starting to have people who didn't experience the damage. They're back to normal, and you're feeling the years of strain that comes with this. What you guys went through up there will take a long time to sort out, and that there was a point where you could really see the difference if you went to the grocery store, whose house had been slaughtered and whose house hadn't. So when you start to get in the long haul, I think it helps to realize that yes, the rest of the world goes on. That doesn't really invalidate what you're experiencing. And I found it helpful to just understand that, to get into that frame of mind that I was in a long haul and that I was going to chip away at this problem. I wasn't going to find a solution right out of the gate.
Okay, that's good advice, I think, for all of us, regardless of what kind of disaster we're recovering from. what role do you think professionals or friends or family play in recovery?
So I was gonna tackle the short and long term from the perspective of a business leader and say, think about your employees, and think about if you have employees and your horizon looks like you're going to try and get open and you'd like to keep your employees, that is really something you can plan for, which is, I mean, I know immediately at my company, they got in touch with everybody. And if you had damage at your house, they immediately had some wraparound services. But even in terms of trying to keep them paid or even partially paid, and encourage them to come back and help with cleanup, find ways that they can, feel like they're still valued. I think it's really a big part of that. So I just was going to come to this kind of from a business standpoint, a business leader, business owner, is think about your employees and think about their plight, give them grace and time to take care of their personal issues, but just can't imagine how valuable it is for them to know you care, and that if you can bring them back, even partial payment will go a long way in building that loyalty and longevity, and kind of keeping the workforce that you have.
I'd like to answer both of those questions in terms of the short term and the long haul. Is being able to see some of the businesses and their resiliency and their quick thinking. There is a local pizza business that had some flooding, and they were down for a little bit, but I noticed that so I think, I know pivot is that word that we thought would disappear, but how do that resiliency is that they then started still selling meals. They had like a certain menu, and they were doing it out of their parking lot. So they understood, and that's what they said, and they welcomed the support from the community because they had already built up a community. But these are we still have to pay they still had to pay their rent. And so what was a way for them to gather money in the in the short term while they're preparing for the long haul, and knowing that in 6 months out of the year, hurricane season. Guaranteed, if you're going to keep a business here in Florida, next season you've got to prepare. So I think that's the long haul, and how can you reimagine the things that you might put in place based on the experiences that you have now. I think that's what the opportunity is. And with Michelle speaking to staffing, we're very fortunate that is kind of what we did. We went into first motive, make sure that the president and CEO is make sure that you guys are okay. You don't have to, come in. And we had a couple of people who actually did have major damages in their homes. And so giving them grace in terms of you take care of what you need to. But there was one of our staff that we actually tag team. She had some damage, and she was lived alone, and so a crew went out one day to clean out part of her house, and then another crew went out another. So that's kind of like that friends and family and community gathering. The other employee had an Amazon wish list, contribute to that. So I think I had friends and family provide me with meals through Uber Eats. So I think that was an opportunity for people to kind of step up if maybe they couldn't be there to do something, but there was different avenues to show that they cared.
And what I'm hearing again and again is that we need to lean in on building our communities up, the connections. I'm seeing a lot more on Facebook about how we need to understand our mutual aid groups better in local areas, whether it's for disasters or whether it's for concerns about politics and things like that. So I'm community is super important to me. And so establishing connections with different groups that you may not have in the past might also be a part of planning and getting to know what can help you in the future, but definitely friends and family too.
We had some amazing resources show up. You know, we had at some point some Marines showed up and they got all of our, you know, disgusting, horrible appliances out. And then these Mormon churches were just driving up and down the streets, and they would come and got out a part of your house for you. It was just, you know, and you're just ready to, you're weeping, you're so appreciative. I had friends that came to help me, and that gave me time to regroup. And then, you know, my house is at the end of a canal, so the whole street landed on my house. It was like the Wicked Witch. And I had, one of the things, I had a lot of stairs and boats, but I also had all these coolers. And so for people who were flooded, I was bringing all these broken coolers, but they were dry. You know, it was a place they could put things. And so then I was going into other houses and helping them as I had been helped, and that gave me a sense of empowerment. During Wilma, I had minimal damage in Wilma, but there was a very poor neighborhood, we call it the Rock, that they had been wiped out. They had gotten very flooded, and I was the drug court therapist for the court at the time, so I kind of worked with a lot of these people. But I went down there and with laundry baskets, and because I had a working washer and dryer, and I did all of these people's laundry, and that made me feel like there was some sense of control, and that it wasn't complete anarchy, and not all, if you have clean laundry, then not all is lost. You know, lean on that and then give it back. Do both of those things, because they both really help your soul.
Hey, I'm going to share something I saw. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
Something I saw.
It's your
during
turn.
Helene. So Helene was a barrier island. So think of, you know, St. Pete Beach to Clearwater Beach, barrier island devastation. And Renelle, I know you saw this as well, so please chime in. So I was able to go out there the next day with my Duke Energy badge, like between FEMA, city, municipal government, your utilities, not only Duke Energy, but others. We literally moved our operations onto the beach. And then slowly but surely, food trucks started showing up, trucks with ice. And they became, and we moved up and down the beaches. We got with all the mayors and we said, where do you need us? And we set up like 3 main hubs, a north, a central, and a south. And I didn't create it, so I can't really speak to that, but I can just share with you, if disasters happen, Renelle, through your chambers, maybe, it was a beautiful lesson. And I'm glad Duke was a part of it. We literally moved our customer service team, like put a table and just said, come see us. You don't got to find us. You don't got to reach us on the phone. Just walk up and we will, you know, we'll shut your account down. Don't worry about paying any bill, whatever it was. You know, then the ice guy was there, and the hot food over here, and the FEMA lady was sitting right there. And it really was a beautiful model that I wanted to share just very quickly, because I think for me it was just, it was nice to see, and I'd love to see more of that during disaster.
I'm going to ask at this point if there's anybody listening who has questions, and if you do, to please put them in the chat. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm sure we can fill the time without anybody putting any questions there. But in case somebody has a question they'd like to see addressed, please put it there.
We had talked about possibly trying to put a document together of some of the things that we addressed in this, so people can take it. And I have 2 lists of things you might want to keep track of for natural disasters that I was going to include in that. If there's anybody else who hasn't heard anything that has worked for you and you would like to add it to the chat, that would be great too.
It's really important to learn from the successes. I think some of what the businesses were able to do was to use the lessons they learned from COVID in this situation, because some of it was keep reaching out to their employees, and even if everybody couldn't be employed full-time, at least they could be employed part-time. One person has asked about dealing with survivor guilt for those who did not suffer in any significant way. Do you all have any advice?
Don't feel guilty.
Right.
Thank God. Thank God that that happened. You know, like, I'm so happy that that didn't happen. And, you know, I think take that impulse and turn it into something productive. You know, go give a little help to somebody, go get the laundry baskets and go do Michelle's laundry because she got flooded and I know her well. If your washing machine had to be on that list, you know, don't assume that just because she's on this panel and she works for Duke Energy, she couldn't use somebody to say, let me just do your laundry. Go, the guilt won't serve anybody, but you can take that knowledge that you got lucky and then take those resources and go. You have, when you are in hell, that tiny little sip of water becomes incredibly important.
And I agree. That's why I was nodding my head. I had a conversation with somebody and she kept saying compared to others. And I was like, but that if you were inconvenienced and you felt something, that is yours. So there's nothing, it's hard to compare everybody's level. There may have been something that you went through that nobody knows about that somebody else didn't. So there's levels of perspectives on what's happening in a person's life as a part of a collective. But I agree, don't feel guilty about it. You were blessed. And as I'm a believer, person of faith, you're blessed to be a blessing. So if there was an opportunity, like Sarah said, if you have the opportunity to help somebody else and maybe that was a reason why you didn't have any impact, is because then you could offer help to assist somebody else. But I wouldn't.
Let it deepen your empathy. Like, use it to feel what somebody else might have. Yeah. And then Sydney talked about a personal quality that assures they can come through it. I would say resilience. You know, being able to put one foot and step in front of the other, and come back from it and let go of some of the stress, some of the cortisol that's building up in you. And then Zelda is talking about, they say to evacuate, but then there's other issues that come with it, not having gas and slow movement and things like that. That's fair to say. I would definitely hope, though, that as many people as possible can get out of barrier islands like the Keys would. To me, the most important thing is safety. Make sure you're alive. I don't care, I would rather be alive and thirsty than dead and
Well, you're not thirsty then.
right.
But I would also, with the evacuation, I think, especially for people who don't live here or maybe new here, is that I don't think I've seen long lines of like traffic busy even through all the hurricanes. But I wasn't trying to leave the state. So I think for some people, their automatic thing is just let me leave the state. And all you have to do is get to a higher ground. Just get to a place that's a non-evacuation zone. So that is, typically within miles of where you may live. So so that may reduce the chance of being in a traffic and stuff like that. And the one thing too is just get gas. I think maybe that would be the first thing. If you hear a storm coming, just fill up on gas. Then that way you don't have to worry about it. And then, like I said, then if the gas you have is not going to get you to out of state, just go to a place that's on a higher elevation. And, I think that would be
Well, and then let's talk about also, especially over here on the west coast of Florida, in my area, literally 75 is it. If 75 is shut down, that's a problem. We went south and over to Miami because we have family in Miami and we were as protected there as parts of North Florida. So, but we need to ask more of our local governments to try and find alternatives to get us out of there. Or how do we get gas more quickly afterwards? How can we fund those things? Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. If you don't evacuate and you have an emergency you are lost. Nobody is going to send out someone into a bad situation and possibly lose that person as well as you. So
But
I-
Renelle makes a really good point, because they really do encourage you. If you can stay in the county, great. Stay with a friend. Stay with somebody who's 5 miles away, who's high and dry and not. They really don't want everyone. You bring up a good point, Zelda, because I was in Jacksonville and it was very difficult to get back with no gas. So I'm not saying it was easy. I don't want to make light of that, but Renelle made a good point. I'll just say that they do want you to stay close, just high and dry with a friend if you can. Yeah. Or family member. Yeah.
We had nightmares trying to get out of Irma's way. You know, we've got one road out of the Keys, and then all of Miami was trying to get out of the way, and most of the state was in the cone. So people were having to get out of the state. And then because we were kept out for so long, you know, a lot of us had extensive damage because of the mold of the water that we came back to. It's really interesting because a lot of the people who evacuated are now saying that they would never evacuate again. But I also have done the trauma therapy on the people who have stayed, and they will never stay again. I am in agreement. I think if they call for an evacuation, get the hell out of the way. Just get out of the way. Yes, you're going to lose stuff. You're going to lose some stuff. You know, I lost everything. My house was gone. My business was gone. I really lost everything. And it took a long time, but now I'm full of stuff. Like, I'm back to having to weed through my stuff and get rid of stuff because I have too much stuff. It's just stuff. Get out of the way.
I would like to end this on a positive note and ask each of you to, what words of encouragement would you share with others who have been through a disaster?
I'm not scared anymore. You know, I wasn't scared during this season. Now I don't want to do it again. I'd rather not do it again. But I wasn't scared. I know how to do this now. And you know, so much of my stress and my suffering was trying to get solutions too quickly and then hitting the frustration and feeling that despair. And so I've learned about myself that no, I'm a badass. I can survive, and I will find my solutions. And but sometimes you have to wait for that solution. You have to have that faith and that resilience and just wait for it. And at the end of it, you're not going to be scared anymore because you will now know about yourself that you know how to do this.
Michelle?
I would say have patience. Nothing is going to happen quick, and it's okay. Give yourself grace, give those around you grace. I really, helping others helped me a lot. And I think a few of you mentioned that as well. So lean into just your local community and bring your patience.
Stephanie?
Yeah. Work on focusing on what's most important. I still remember 2 weeks after Andrew, I had a meltdown because I was taking a cold sponge bath. So I get that you're going to have those moments, but the fact that we were still alive and my parents' house didn't have much damage, and you know, try and focus on that. Try and have resilience. If you need to learn about resilience ahead of time, I can put you in the right direction. But also, yeah, empathy for others. And then start thinking about why are things this way? Why do we keep putting up with this? How can we start to force change? That's my other thought.
Ronelle?
I would say for me, it is just the awareness. I think that just brought up, like I said, we live in a place that 6 months out of the year, even though you knew it and we lived it, it was that. So I think it's just kind of now that in some parts things have settled down, kind of a recap of even the experience. So even if it means journaling to get, your emotions, your feelings out, because I think that'll give a clarity for a plan ahead. So then I can think about what worked for me, what didn't work for me, and then actually have documentation of, okay, well, this, I needed this, but I didn't. What can I do? If I need to call hey, can you, we're coming to stay with you in California, those kind of things, like having those plans, type of things in play. But I think it is, and it may not happen soon because we're still so in the midst of it. But I definitely think the opportunity to journal, and I'm hoping to do that sooner rather than later, so we can get the emotions and stuff out and then be able to have a clear plan ahead if I decide to stay in Florida. There's that.
I want to thank all of you, Sarah, Michelle, Stephanie, and Ronelle, for sharing your personal and professional experiences and wisdom for others. And to let everybody know that the recording will be put out on our BPW Florida website, I would say in about 2 weeks. We need some time. Our executive director is on holiday this week, and we've got Thanksgiving next week. So look for it in early December. But thank you all
Sheila,
very
if I
much.
could, if I
Sheila.
could just add one thing real quick.
Sure.
I have resources myself as a trauma specialist, and throughout the country, the insurances have waived the interstate issues with seeing therapists from other states. So I have an entire network of trauma therapists, myself included, that we are willing to do free trauma therapy for anybody who is in need. So please keep that in mind. Reach out to me. If you know of people who need that resource, I can make that connection. I want to make sure we had that in today's recording.
Okay. And for BPW members, you can find Sarah's contact information in the member directory, which is online. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sheila. Good to see you all.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.